Welcome. Welcome to this month's All Hands meeting. My name is Jim Lawrence, Board Chair, FxSMC Mateo County. FxSMC Mateo County is a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to improving the lives of all San Mateo County residents. Our goal is to improve the safety and security of all residents in San Mateo County. Our mission is to persuade the Board of Supervisors to take advantage of existing state law, AB 1185, and install a civilian oversight board and an Inspector General's office for our San Mateo Sheriff's Office. Ladies and gentlemen, we spend $300 million annually into the Sheriff's Office to provide safety and security throughout the country, throughout the county. Tonight, our objective is to explain exactly what is a civilian oversight board, what is an Inspector General's office, where do they begin, where do they end, what are the rules of engagements, who selects the members, who do they support, what are their responsibilities, and last but not least, how can we all participate? We want you to leave here tonight with a working knowledge of what a civilian oversight board and Inspector General's office is, and the ability to discuss it comfortably with your neighbors. Now I'm going to give the floor to our Executive Director, Ms. Nancy Goodban, who will share with you the specifics of existing law, AB 1185, as well as some industry standard best practices of a civilian oversight board and an Inspector General's office that must be in the ordinance for it to be effective and deliver the first step in our goal of improving safety and security for all San Mateo County residents. Again, welcome. I look forward to answering any and all of your questions. Now I'll turn the floor over to Nancy.
Thanks, Jim. And it's great to be here. Welcome to everybody. We're going to go over a slide deck, and don't worry about trying to catch it all. I'll post the whole slide deck in chat, but I'm also going to share my screen so you can see. And after that, we're going to have questions. Any questions that you have, put them in chat. And Trina will be going through them. So I just need to move this around. There. So we are talking about the FxSMC San Mateo County proposal for the way that independent civilian oversight will work. It's the Board of Supervisors that makes the final decision. We are working closely with their committee, but they will make the final decision. And like Jim said, we're a local nonprofit. We're really working about civilian oversight for the Sheriff's Office, which is not the police departments. Every city has the right to have their own police department, and those have police chief that is responsible to the city government, to the city council and city manager. The sheriff is responsible for the unincorporated area, the jail, and has contracts with 5 cities and towns to provide patrol services there to places that don't have their own police department right now. And those are Half Moon Bay, Millbrae, San Carlos, Portola Valley, and Woodside. But the other cities all have their own. What we're talking about is fundamentally based on, as Jim said, AB 1185. This was passed and went into effect in beginning of January 2021. And it was passed by the state legislature, Assembly Bill 1185, in order to strengthen independent civilian oversight in the state, based specifically on concerns that took place in Sacramento County, because the Inspector General there was not allowed to go into the jail because the sheriff didn't like one of the reports that the Inspector General had put together based on an incident that happened where they killed an unarmed man, a person of color. So the legislature decided to step in and give boards of supervisors or county community residents the right to set up a community-based oversight board, a professional Inspector General, and it says both of them are appointed by the County Board of Supervisors and both shall have subpoena power. That's basically what it is, and we'll send you a link to the AB 1185 a little bit later. So why do people want oversight? It protects civil rights. In our county, Black people are 9 times more likely to be arrested than white people, Hispanics twice as likely to be arrested than white people. And looking at the small number of people killed by the police, we have Black people in our county are 17 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement. So civil rights is an issue. Oversight has gotten more and more popular since the murder of George Floyd. We're now up to 220 or more cities and counties around the country that have oversight. And it's because communities are concerned about the civil rights of their residents. It provides checks and balances. In a way, it's like any company has an outside auditor, regardless of who the CEO is, regardless of who the sheriff is, you need checks and balances, and you need somebody to independently outside of the agency, the company, the sheriff's office, to be looking at what's going on. It provides transparency and accountability. Right now, in the past, there's been no way at all for the public to know what's going on. We did just elect a sheriff who took office barely 3 months ago, who ran commendably on a platform of transparency, integrity, and community engagement. And she's put some transparency efforts and community engagement efforts into play already, which is very, very positive. Oversight works best when you're doing it with the sheriff's office, not something you do to the sheriff's office. It supports effective policing. It's been found in other communities that the police actually do better reports, and as a result, they're doing a better job policing. They're paying more attention to what they're doing. It builds positive relationships with the community, which is, again, something that our current sheriff, our new sheriff, is trying to do, and it reduces county liability. Our county paid out $5.25 million in the last 6 months of 2022. That's just what we read in the paper. It could be more, based on incidents of sheriff misconduct, sheriff office misconduct. So, if not to say that oversight is a cure-all, but if you have transparency into the issues and so forth, you're going to do a lot better job in knowing what to prevent going forward. So we got started about a year ago. We launched about a year ago. Did a lot of work reaching out to elected officials and community groups. And we're really glad that last September, the Board of Supervisors unanimously voted to create a subcommittee of Supervisors Pine and Slocum, who is now the Board President Pine and Vice President Slocum, which is the Public Safety Advisory Committee. They voted unanimously in November to have that committee come back with models that include both a civilian board and an inspector general. And starting in December, the committee has been reviewing models, meeting with the community, meeting with us. We've had several meetings with them, talking to the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, NACOL, and talking to the sheriff. And that it will continue until we're all done. So people say, what is oversight and what do you need to be effective with independent oversight? NACOL, that National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, has put out 13, and I'm going to just kind of overview them, but you will see this because I'm going to give you a link to that. It has to be independent of the sheriff's office. It has to have clear jurisdiction. It has to have authority, cooperation from the sheriff's office, sustained support from the stakeholders, which includes the Board of Supervisors as well as the community. It has to have decent funding. It's not going to work if it's not funded sufficiently. It has to have what they call procedural justice and legitimacy. It has to be seen as working in a fair way, and everybody has equal treatment. There has to be public reporting, transparency. There has to be an opportunity to really look at not just particular incidents, but also patterns and practice in policing practice and look at policies. There has to be community outreach, and it has to be confidential. People need to know that they can make a complaint, speak up without retaliation. So then the guts of it is what we're proposing. And this is our recommendation. It's in a draft ordinance that is on our website. It's been there for a few months now. It may not turn out to be quite like this, but we said 11 community members, 5 of them, there's 5 supervisorial districts. Each supervisor we recommend would have 2, and then the 11th person would be assigned by the board as a whole. And by law, it's the board of supervisors that appoints them. They have to be impartial, knowledgeable, committed, team players, diverse geographically, and diverse in life experience. That board, we foresee, would meet monthly. That's commonly what happens. Do a lot of community outreach and listening, receive complaints. The board, again, under AB 1185, AB 1185 says that board shall have subpoena power, and that board can review and recommend policies and public reports on a regular basis to the board of supervisors and to the sheriff. So it's all about community outreach, taking those complaints and doing something with them and putting out public reports. The Inspector General is a different kettle of fish. It's not a lay board of civilians. It's an experienced attorney who knows the criminal justice system and knows how to gather evidence, to make investigations, to interview witnesses. The job of the Inspector General, and generally there's a small staff there, is to investigate complaints from civilians and whistleblowers, and really important to investigate incidents. These incidents tend to include excessive use of force, deaths in custody, that's to say in jail or in detainment, and racial profiling trends. And if you look around the country at all the other ones that are doing some kind of oversight, it always includes investigating these incidents from an outside perspective. Coordinating, there has to be a memorandum of agreement with the sheriff's office and the district attorney to coordinate to make sure that that there is no risk really of interfering with an active investigation or an active criminal investigation. But they're doing it all around the country and it works. Again, AB 1185 says the Inspector General shall have subpoena power, and they would be able to review trends and patterns of practice. They would be able to take recommendations from the civilian board and recommend policies and issue public reports. So that all sounds good. Sounds like they have a lot of power, but do they really? No, they do not. With the sheriff, it's an elected position, and there's no way to remove or discipline a sheriff other than every 4 years at the ballot box. So oversight is a good complement. It's really necessary, but it's limited. Oversight is best with the sheriff because it provides transparency and accountability. It's public reporting. It's listening to the public, responding to complaints. What oversight cannot do by law, by California Constitution, is set policy for the Board of Supervisors or for the sheriff. It can recommend, but it can't change the policy. And similarly, any kind of oversight cannot discipline a deputy or fire a deputy. They can make recommendations if needed, but they can't actually make a difference. And I think that it's important for us to recognize the limits of oversight, the limits of independent civilian oversight, because we do feel it's one tool in the toolbox for all of us to make the community safer and better, and to implement what the sheriff is trying to do, which is making a positive difference in the community, a safe place for everyone, where everyone can report and be heard and be treated equitably. So that kind of leads to some of the misconceptions we've heard is well, gosh, this thing could just undercut the sheriff. What if you just get someone in there that you know, is negative or you know, has an axe to grind? And in fact, the oversight supports the sheriff. We met with the sheriff just today and continue to meet with the sheriff as well as the board of supervisors on a regular basis. NACOL recommends that you develop the oversight with law enforcement. You don't do it to law enforcement. Once it's there, it functions independently of the sheriff, but it's not meant to go out against the sheriff. So it's really important that the supervisors stay in ongoing communication with the sheriff and deputies, as well as we stay in ongoing communication with the sheriff and deputies. And we're very open to any kind of communication. I know Jim has met with the deputies union on multiple occasions, and we reached out and invited the union and the command staff and so forth to tonight's meeting. So another thing that we've heard, I mean, I've talked about how it would work, how we see it would work and what the limits are, but people say, wait, what if the folks on the oversight commission, on the civilian oversight board, or the inspector general just comes in there with an axe to grind and they just want to undercut policing, they want to defund the police and stop the sheriff from doing its work. And the guardrails, I think, on that is recognizing as a community that the sheriff's office needs to be supported and strengthened in order to meet its mission to protect and serve. The board of supervisors, remember, appoints the civilian oversight board. They appoint the inspector general. And honestly, the board has every reason to appoint people who would support, not destroy public safety. Our board of supervisors would be foolish to appoint people to these positions who would destroy public safety in the community, because then the board's going to hear about it. So that's our biggest guardrail, is we have to trust ourselves and our elected representatives. And I know every community is different, but in our county, we really do need to trust that we are going to support public safety over time and make it better. So another thing we've heard, and I think this is an important concern that's been brought up sometimes by the deputies, is the sense that this is just another way to punish them, or they're going to get reprimanded or disciplined or fired for just doing their job. Because who among us wants another boss beside our regular boss to come in and tell us what we're doing wrong? I get that. Remembering a couple of things. Number one, we have to work closely with the deputies union and have them involved in some of the planning for this, as well as the command staff. But the purpose of oversight is to learn, is to do things better. It's not to punish. If there is a deputy who is breaking the law, it's up to the district attorney to punish them. Criminal conduct is the domain of the district attorney, not the oversight board. So oversight does investigate incidents and make sure that policy is followed, and see if the policy needs to be changed, see if the training needs to be improved. And yeah, sometimes that will reflect on the deputy that made a mistake because they were poorly trained or they weren't following policy. So the oversight board, and some do, can recommend change in policy or discipline, but can't make it happen. So it's important, I think, that if someone is doing their job and if we're all working together to try to improve things, that this is going to be a positive effort, like it is. The new sheriff in Santa Clara County was prior the police chief in Palo Alto, and he was saying that it's been really helpful to the line staff to have someone there that they can kind of count on to help them do their job a little bit better. Not decide on the training, but identify areas where maybe the training wasn't sufficient. So those are the three things I think that we've heard, or the kind of the big things is that the deputies are concerned. There are concerns among some people in the community that this will just attack the sheriff and, how are we going to make sure it'll work? So I think the last concern we've heard from the sheriff's side really is about what it will cost and where that money's going to come from. We are recommending 1% of the amount of the sheriff office budget, which is about $300 million right now. It's the same thing that Sonoma County wrote into their most recent charter amendment or ordinance, I guess it was, that they passed a couple of years ago, 1%. So that'd be about $3 million here. It doesn't necessarily all get spent. The cost would be the inspector general. We recommend stipends, small stipends for the people who are on the civilian oversight board, so that even people who have jobs that they can't take time away from would be able to go to that board and serve on it, reimbursement. But I think a lot of the costs would also be the investigations. It would cover, those kind of costs would cover the cost of the county attorneys helping to look into things. It would cover any ancillary costs and a small number of staffs. We recommended, and we put in our draft ordinance, and NACOL agrees, remember NACOL, the National Association, that these funds do not come out of law enforcement's budget. It is not the responsibility of the sheriff, and it shouldn't take away from their programming. It's a county responsibility. And I think that's something we have to keep reminding our board of supervisors. They're the ones that decide what the budget is and how to fund it. And they need to, we would recommend they direct the county manager not to reduce funding or move it from another area in order to fund oversight. This is their responsibility. You know, it's like, again, hiring an outside auditor, but it is fine to the board of supervisors. So another thing that comes up, and we do have someone from the sheriff's new care program here if people have questions later. The sheriff's community advisors for responsible engagement, which has just been launched, and it was something that the sheriff put in her campaign platform when she ran for office. She said, I want to have listening forums in 3 different parts of the county and meet with them quarterly so I can hear what the community is saying. And that's what's being put in place. The difference between that and independent oversight, because some people say, well, isn't that good enough? We have the care program. Now we know we have a way to talk to the sheriff about concerns and so forth. But remember, oversight is different. The care program is not independent of the sheriff. The care members are selected by the sheriff, and they report to the sheriff's office. They don't investigate incidents. That's not their job. It's not their charter. They're not allowed to do that. They don't analyze practice and analyze trends in policing. They don't make public reports and recommendations. It's entirely different. It's something that's valuable for the sheriff to get internal feedback. And again, back to looking at a corporation. The corporation always has internal feedback, and that's really, really important. You know, the corporate entity needs to know that, but they also always have an outside auditor for their books. So you need someone independent of the sheriff's office. So I think our final slide, before we take questions, and while I'm mentioning this slide, put your questions in chat if you haven't already. But people are going to say, well, what's going on now? There's community outreach by the Public Safety Advisory Committee. The Board of Supervisors Committee is planning to go out and have some listening sessions. By Fix and San Mateo County, we're planning to go out to a broader array of community groups and share information and get feedback. The Public Safety Advisory Committee, that's Supervisors Slocum and Pine, are putting up a website. They have a kind of a framework for it, and they're going to be holding a public study session. They talked about that at their strategic retreat in January. We don't know the timing of that study session, but we also know that they're tasked with recommending to the full board what the structure, authority, roles, and funding would be for oversight. And we've gone over what we would like. We want an 11-person board that represents the community, that has subpoena power, an inspector general that has attorney criminal criminal law experience and also has subpoena power, that the roles are mostly the civilian group gets a lot of public feedback, and if things need to be investigated, sends them in general to the inspector general to investigate. And we recommend that 1% funding not to come out of the sheriff's office budget. So that's what we hope they'll come up with. And we are meeting with them regularly, but they may not agree with all of that. And then they're going to pass and develop, an ordinance and pass it and implement it. We're expecting that that's probably going to take till the end of the year to pass an ordinance, and then it would be implemented early in the next year. I mean, realistically, we all lost some time, sadly, this winter, because, as soon as the holidays were over, we had these terrible floods and the tragedy in Half Moon Bay, and people have been really focused on other things, understandably. So we're really thinking it'll be the end of the year when this all gets passed. So I'm going to stop sharing. And it's time for questions.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Trina, and I'm the outreach work group lead. I have some great questions that have been put in the chat. Please continue to put questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to answer everyone's questions. So the first one, I'll go with Steve's question, since Nancy, you just talked some about the Sheriff's Care Program. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say about that, or perhaps George Dale could chime in, since he's working with the sheriff on this care program.
Yes, I mean, I shared, George, if you could chime in, I think that would be great.
Hi, everybody. I think what Nancy said is absolutely correct. It's an internal program. It's much more meant to sort of bring ideas that the sheriff has and get very diverse. We are about to set the first meeting. So, we've always thought that these two things operate in parallel. There's no conflict, there's no overlap. Obviously, I'm here. I've been here the last few meetings. So it's important to know what's going on, but it is not meant to take the place of oversight or an inspector general. Don't know what else to say.
Well, thank you, George, for sharing. Appreciate it. This next question, I think we'll have Jim answer, and that is, Jim, what are the practical effects for regular people? What do you think that for regular people will oversight have? Will oversight really have a positive impact for the community?
Thank you, Trina. Yes, I think it will. Just to kind of put it in perspective, the public today really doesn't have a forum to, voice any opposition, any concerns without fear of retaliation. We want to eliminate that. Second of all, we want to make it such that the public will feel comfortable just coming forward, really saying good, nice things, as well as anything that's not so nice, and give them that particular forum. When we look at the county, our county, is really large, and the sheriff's office has a huge piece of territory. So I think it's incumbent upon us to really work with the sheriff's office, work with the community, and really bring those two bodies together. And I think oversight, again, will be just the first step in moving that forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And Nancy, if you could remind us all again, Joanne would like to know who selects the inspector general as well as folks for the civilian board.
Yeah, and thanks, Joanne. That's a good question. AB 1185 says that the Board of Supervisors can create a civilian oversight board with subpoena power and can create an inspector general office and is responsible for putting both of them, appointing both of them. In addition, the law specifies that this Board of Supervisors appoints the chair of the civilian board.
Thank you. Jim, what would you say to people who say things like, well, I don't have a problem with the police. I've never had a problem with the police or the sheriff. Why do we really need this? What would you say to those folks?
Well, I'd say to those people that, San Mateo County has a huge population that's Black and brown. And for whatever reason, if you look at the statistics, they're out of line with the population here. I don't think that any person would want to go forward knowing that our police force is treating a certain segment of the population differently. We're just trying to make it safe and secure for everyone. So I'd say to you that, our police chief, as you know, I was a former mayor, has checks and balances. She had a boss that she reported to, the city manager, as well as the city council. We're just trying to bring that same level of governance to the sheriff's office to improve the relationships.
Thank you. And kind of along the lines with that, how would we respond to someone who lives in a city that has its own police department, who might think that sheriff oversight is unnecessary? What about those people?
I'd say to those people that, you're lucky, with the sheriff, there's no oversight at this point in time. So therefore, some things have been happening that we all are not proud of. If we look back at some of those incidents, we say, what could we have done to prevent those? I believe that any loss, life loss, is terrible, any one. So if we've had oversight, who knows? We may have never had those things. I'm looking at this point forward. How can we improve San Mateo County for all residents? I think we owe it to everyone who lives here. Everybody pays equal taxes. Everybody should be able to enjoy the lifestyle that we have.
Okay, thank you. Nancy, what about recommendations that the oversight board makes? Will these recommendations be made public, or would they just go straight to the sheriff's department and stay there?
They would be made public. And I was just going to add in on to Jim's response before.
Yes,
if you
please.
live in a community that is not policed by the sheriff, you're still having your kids go to the jail, which is run by the sheriff. There's one jail in every county, and the jail is run by the sheriff. I think that's true in every county in California. And that's a large part of the budget. And any of our kids could get caught up in that, or any of us. So it affects everybody. With regard to the recommendations, unless if it's a investigation that has to do with people's names and so forth, it would be kept confidential. But any kind of recommendations on policy changes or training changes and so forth would be made public. And other communities do it either twice a year or once a year. And some places coordinate between the Inspector General's report, and I think this is a good model, and the Civilian Oversight Board's report, so that they're kind of jointly doing a report. But they are public to the Board of Supervisors and the sheriff.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I think either Nancy or Jim can answer these next questions. And I have a couple of questions that are kind of the same in the chat. And it's like, what about people who are saying, you know what, this is just another government bureaucracy. We don't need it. It's just going to get bogged down and nothing, will ever change. How would you address that?
Well, as Nancy alluded to, oversight is spreading quite rapidly. More than 200 cities now have it as a means of overlooking and taking a look at the sheriff's department to make sure that relationship is what it should be. But more importantly, I think once you involve the people with the Board of Supervisors and the various people serving on the oversight committee with an Inspector General, I think it's a recipe for success. And I'm really looking forward to installing that and reporting back to the general public that it's a good use of taxpayers' funds. Because remember, we invest $300 million a year into the sheriff's office. And today, there's no rule that says they have to be accountable for what, how they spend it, how it changed, or anything. And I think we need to change that. Thank you.
Yeah, we did spend, like I said, but if people weren't noticing, we spent $5.2 million in the last 6 months of 2022 on payments due to misconduct in the sheriff's office. Or I shouldn't say misconduct, but due to settlements with people who were concerned about misconduct.
Yes. And on that note, Nancy, we have another question about the money that's been paid out. Where does that money come from?
I have not done a Public Records Act request, and we are, I believe, self-insured. But
Nancy.
I think,
Yeah, I'll take that one.
yeah, thanks.
The county is self-insured, but the first $1 million is paid by the county. It's like your deductible for auto insurance. You pay the first $1 million, and then over that, the insurance company pays the balance. But keep in mind, it's like your auto insurance. If you have several wrecks the next year, you know what your premiums are going to be. So it hurts us all in the pocketbook. We're paying it, whether or not we realize it or not. The taxpayers are paying it.
Okay, taxpayer dollars. Okay, a question about the Inspector General from Lucy. Would the Inspector General be part of the DA's office? Are they attached to FxSMC San Mateo County somehow? Or is it a completely separate entity that is funded by the county, but not necessarily a part of the county? And I think Nancy.
Yeah, I can start tackling that. Technically, it is up to the Board of Supervisors where they're placed, but they would not be part of the district attorney's office. They would not be part of the sheriff's office. They need to be independent of the current law enforcement structure in order to basically do their job. And they would be paid for by the county.
Okay, thank you. And, you know, just a basic question, if the board is appointing the members of this oversight board, how do we prevent them, the community, from not appointing, you know, ex-deputies, their golfing buddies, their friends? What role does the community have in that?
Well, in all my meetings with the board, they've committed to appointing people who are, you know, meet a certain criteria for this particular oversight board. And let's remember that although this may be political, I trust the board of supervisors. I don't think any of them would do anything of that nature. I think the people they select will reflect what we consider a good value set in this community.
Yeah, and I'm going to chime in on that too. Honestly, this is not going to work if it doesn't work for the Board of Supervisors, if it doesn't work for the sheriff, if it doesn't work for the community. So all of us have to work together, which is why the board wants to go out and do these listenings. The board subcommittee wants to go out and do these listening sessions, and which is why we're doing events like this to answer questions. As the model hasn't been decided yet. So some of these are things that the board subcommittee will be struggling with, and then they will make a recommendation to the full board. So this is a really good time to be asking these kind of questions. And we are all in this together. It's FxSMC San Mateo. It's just an entity of, we're basically a bunch of people from different groups that came together with a common cause. And we aren't going to be part of the ongoing. We're not a structure that would be part of the Civilian Oversight Board or anything like that. We're just trying to make sure that it gets going, that it's a really good model. And in talking to the sheriff again today, she reiterated this should be a good model that can work for other communities too. And we can do that. So it's all going to be about making sure we do it together.
Yes, absolutely. And also, Karina wanted to remind those of us in the chat that even if a city has its own police department, you're still within the sheriff's jurisdiction. Chinadu-Akobe was killed by deputies while in a city that did have its own and does have its own police department. So having your own city police department won't protect you from the ill of the sheriff necessarily.
Although a little thing on that, because it was Millbrae,
Yes.
which is policed by the sheriff, but people have pointed out this is very, very true. All the law enforcement appropriately coordinates, and it's regional, and the sheriff is one of the lead agencies. And if any police department needs help, they call on the sheriff to send help and support. So if there's something going on, you know, the mass shootings that took place in Half Moon Bay were responded to by the sheriff because that's one of the cities where the sheriff does policing. But I'm guessing that even if they had their own police department, they probably would have also called for help from the sheriff.
Right.
They all cooperate with each other.
Yes. So FxSMC has been the leader in working with the Board of Supervisors to bring civilian oversight to San Mateo County. We have a question about since the board has decided that they'd like to move forward with creating civilian oversight, perhaps an inspector general, what role does FxSM have now? Is it done? Have we done what we needed to do? What is the leadership of FxSM doing? And then what's left for the people who support oversight to do? Is the work done? Can we
I'll
pop
lead,
the
Nancy.
champagne or?
The first thing I'll remind everyone is that the devil's in the details. There's a lot of models out there for oversight and inspector generals. We want to make sure that, as Nancy indicated, one, with the most effective means is incorporated into our oversight model. Two, we want to work with the board to go out to the community to engage all segments of the community and make sure all voices are heard. So we have a real rounded view of what this oversight board and inspector general should incorporate. And three, last, but more importantly, I think that what FxSM's trying to do is keep the light shining because you can see for the last 2 months, we got distracted. We don't want to get distracted and let this go by the wayside. The board has a lot of responsibilities they have to take care of. I want to make sure that this one happens this year. So FxSM will be actively pursuing with the board to make sure whatever steps are necessary to bring this to a completion happens by the end of the year. Nancy, anything to add?
I totally agree with that. I think now is the time, since the board decided they want to move ahead with this, but they haven't decided how, now is a really good time for us and the community to clarify, the rest of the community to clarify exactly how this should look. And that's why we have that slide on the 13 effective principles for successful oversight. NACOL specifically says these aren't best practices. It's different everywhere. Each model, it has to be fine-tuned depending on what the community is like, but these are the principles that make it effective.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And I just want to read David's comment. He says that he was a person who never had a problem with law enforcement, but he's well aware that it is his tax money that pays for settlements and judgments, such as the $5.5 million in the last few months. He wants a sheriff's department that is not above the law and that they assume people will never learn of any wrongdoing. And with regard to another bureaucracy, in a perfect world, we would not need it, but we don't live in a perfect world. So thank you very much, David, for that. There was another question. Oh, Phoebe. Phoebe was asking, are there cities in San Mateo County that don't really support civilian oversight? And if so, do we know what their concerns are?
I don't know of any city that doesn't support oversight. We've gotten endorsements from city councils, mayors, all our politicians countywide in support of oversight. So I don't know any city that's on record of saying we don't support oversight. I think cities with police chiefs, look at it from standpoint that they do have oversight. They do have checks and balances over their police chief. So for their particular city, we're not saying that you need oversight. We're saying that in the case of the sheriff, there's no checks and balances. We want to add those checks and balances and make sure that we have the police chief, the sheriff's office that we all can be proud of.
Yeah, I think that's exactly true. We've got 5 cities and towns that did specifically endorse this, but that's kind of hard to do because you have to get a majority. They were all unanimous except for one, to all vote for a resolution or a letter of support. And some of those were cities that are policed by the sheriff and some were not. So I think that was pretty positive. And a lot of elected officials. I think the people that have expressed to us on the side, including elected officials, concerns about it, are concerned about these things we're talking about. What if it's just there to punish the deputies or to punish the sheriff's department? Why don't we let them do their job? We have a new sheriff, and our response to we have a new sheriff, we're working with the new sheriff, and we know that this isn't going to happen. It's going to be developed over the next year. And so the new sheriff is also putting in place, some really positive restructuring in the jail and restructuring of the organization to change the kind of training they do and their whole approach to the culture. So this can be developed in tandem, and it's kind of supportive.
Okay. And there was another question about the CARE program that came. It came to me directly. I think it was an accident, but maybe George can answer this question. Is it up and running yet? Have the 3 or 4 areas been identified? And what is the status right now with the CARE program?
There are 3 groups, coast side, south of San Mateo, so we're calling that South County, and San Mateo and north is North County. We have reached out to the people who have applied and been accepted, and we are now starting the tough decision of when to have the first meeting. So the groups have been set and they've been notified, and we look to start the first meetings by the end of April. And there would be 3 separate meetings.
Okay,
And
great. Thank you very much.
And
Go
you'll
ahead,
be
Nancy.
announcing this, I think, probably, George, as that happens, announcing it publicly.
I don't know.
Oh, well,
It's not a big secret. It's just the people who are in the list. It's not a public meeting.
yeah,
It's not a secret meeting, but it's not a public meeting. We're not subject to the Brown Act and all that. So it's really getting together with the 3 groups. There's assuming everybody follows through, there's 20 people, I think, in the South County, 14 or 15 in Coastside, and about 14 in the North County. And we have been in contact with them, and I think they have to do all the formation stuff and figure out how exactly they want to proceed. But so maybe there's a press release saying it's done, but not that it's a big announcement as to the first meeting.
yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Wonderful, thank you. A couple of technical questions here. One from both from Lucy. Does AB 1185 outline how the Board of Supervisors is supposed to maintain the oversight group and Inspector General's office once FxSM disbands?
No, it doesn't specify anything, and I'll post a link in the chat. It's a very short, and it basically says it can be set up either by a Board of Supervisors or by a county vote of the county residents.
Okay.
So, and
And
FxSM isn't planning to disband.
Right, we'll move on. No, and we'll continue. Karina would like everyone to know, and this is very important, that it's important that people know that the need for oversight is not about the character of the elected sheriff. It's good governance and should apply equally regardless of who holds office. And that is a good thing to remember. It is not about who holds the office of the sheriff. It's just good governance. Also a question about, is there a term attached to members serving on the oversight group? What about the Inspector General? Once they're in that position, is it a forever thing or is it a term thing?
And that isn't specified by AB 1185, and every county does it differently. So that's an example of the kind of thing that the Board of Supervisors is going to be looking at. They're working with the county attorney. County attorneys are going out looking at different models. Some places have, limited to 2 terms of different lengths. So the details like that is exactly why Jim said the devil's in the details. There is no answer yet.
And Lucy's very glad to hear that FxSM is not disbanding. So thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
Yes, yeah. I do believe I have gotten to all of the questions.
I have something, Trina, then.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen. RJ usually wraps us up with a gratitude exercise, but he was unable to be here. So Karina reminded me, I'm sharing my screen. Can you see the shop?
Yes.
Okay. So this is really cool. Some of us have already bought stuff, but it's on our website. There's a menu and you can just pick shop. And thank you, Karina, for redoing our website. But we don't get all the money on this. I mean, it's less than 20%, but it's really cool because there's different stuff you can get. You pick the style you want. And Karina, you can say something if you want, because you develop, black and white or yellow. And then if you shop that style, like if you like this style and you click on shop that style, it gives you all the stuff that you could get. You can get hats and bandanas and t-shirts and I got a computer cover. You can get stickers. So it's very cool.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll say I bought one of the tri-blend t-shirts. It's super soft, runs a little bit smaller than the size chart says, so be aware. But if you do this, you're doing us two favors. One, we get about 17% of the proceeds to help support our work, and we do have expenses. And two, if you take it out in public, you can help spread the word. People will be like, hey, what the heck is that? And you can tell them about us. So that would be super helpful. So everybody go buy one thing today.
It's totally fun. It's really fun to get that kind of swag, and we all love that kind of thing. I'm going to post a couple of things in chat. Maybe as I do that, maybe Jim can say thank you to everyone, because I have to go figure out where to find these things. I'm going to post a link to the slide deck, and we'll send out a copy of the recording as well.
Let me say.
And before you do that, Jim, I have a couple of quick announcements.
Sure, I was gonna say
I just
that.
want to remind everybody, as you know, our all hands meeting is typically the first Tuesday of every month. In May, we will not be having that meeting because we'll be having a wonderful picnic on May 20th in Belmont at Twin Pines Park. You will all be getting email invitations and reminders. We hope to see all of you there, and it's a time to just get together and celebrate and meet each other in person and help each other continue to support this work that we do. And Nancy and Beth have both put that in the chat, but you will get email messages from us as well. And then the second message is, if any of you belong to other groups and would like to have FxSM representatives come out and talk to your groups about oversight and what it means, we would be more than happy to do that. So feel free to email us at, make sure I get this right. Is it FxSMC.org info? Why don't you give it, Nancy? Because I'm terrible.
I'm going to put it in the chat. info@FxSMC.org.
Yes.
And those emails go to me and Trina. So we'll get back.
Yes. And so we'd be happy to arrange speakers to come out to your groups to speak either in person or on Zoom. Okay.
And I did
Thank you.
Thank you for the pitch for the May 20th. That is so fun. All of our events have been great, and we've been really fortunate. We've always gotten like 7 or 8 or 9 elected officials come who are really committed, and it's always just really festive, and it's totally fun and very relaxing. So
yes,
so there's that. And I think we're excited too, because we've lined up our June speaker, which is who is a member of the brand new sheriff oversight board in San Francisco. He is on the board. He's a formerly incarcerated person. He's an artist. He's done a mural in the jail there. And he's part of the San Francisco Jail Justice Coalition. And it was just intriguing to hear from him the kind of stuff that he's doing personally as a member of the oversight board to support that connection between the sheriff and the community. And we thought that'd be a really nice thing to hear.
Well,
yeah, and the picnic, we'll have to clean up the form, but the picnic is from 2 to 4 p.m.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Again, welcome. Thank you for everybody attending. And remember, we want you to feel comfortable talking to your neighbor about oversight. If there's any questions unanswered, please go to our website, www.FxSMC.org, or reach out to me, because it affects all of us. Thank you and good night.
Yeah, thank you all.